Hi everyone, Chicken here. In the last lesson, we finished rendering the hair. In this chapter, we will be finishing up the clothes and props. I'll go through really quickly how I render clothes and introduce another way of rendering that can help you with materials you're unfamiliar with. First, let's finish up the clothes. The process of rendering clothes is very similar to everything else. We start with shadows and work our way to the light. When I render clothes, usually I'll look for a point of tension, which are places that are pulling against the clothes. In this case, it will be her breasts. Because the clothes are the tightest around there won't be any folds. Instead, the folds will be around the breast and coming out from the point of tension. You can see the lines of shading and shadows that I drew that come out from the point of tension. And like how we paint everything else, for the shadows of the clothes, I'm gonna choose a secondary color. I'll go for a complementary color this time because I think green is a pretty good color for this piece, as we have green in the background as well, so it can double up as our ambient light color. And when I'm quite happy with the overall shading, I'll start to introduce the line art to really clean it up. For clothes, it's really good to have a mixture of hard and soft edges. So while I'll blend out some of the shadow lines, I'll leave some fairly unblended. And if you're really struggling with the folds of the clothes, just grab a reference and copy it. Use a shadow color and block in where you see all the shadows are in the reference. Take note of where the point of tensions are in the reference and try to copy that and the shapes present in the fabric. And that's pretty much how I paint fabric. As always, I'll leave the unedited process video for the rest of her dress in the class notes. But for now, let's move on to her props. As a character artist, I have the most experience drawing the parts of a character, so skin, hair, and clothes. But sometimes we will have props involved that can be of varying materials. Most of the time, we can just render them normally by using the techniques we learned in the previous lessons and painting them with the use of reference. However, even with references, some materials can be pretty tricky to render. Like in this piece, her straw basket has quite a lot of texture and different little shadows. Rendering it while worrying about color, tone, saturation can be pretty tricky. So, for difficult materials like this, we can use a rendering technique of painting in grayscale and then coloring it later. Like our painting plan, we go in grayscale first, then add the color later on. Difference being that the grayscale this time will be a lot more detailed than our painting plan. We will really be putting in as much detail as we can in grayscale. This way, when we paint, we are not so distracted by the colors of the material, and instead we can focus only on getting the texture and the forms right. So I've started out by blocking in the basket using a grey. The specific grey color that you use is not that important. I'll usually just choose around a mid-tone grey because we can still adjust it later on. I use my sketch line art as a very rough guide, but once I have my big shape down, I remove it and I'll start to render it while looking at the reference that I have. Imagine you're sketching a still life with pencils. I'll start out by blocking in the big shadows, as it is always a good idea to work from the big picture to small details. Now I'll start to draw on the line art and start introducing more detailed shading. If you're struggling a little bit with the tones, you can make your reference black and white. Then you might have an easier time identifying the tones and details. And to get better at copying, you just have to do more practice. Try copying things more or doing still life sketches. The ability to copy well is really useful even in anime art. I will skip ahead to the finished grayscale piece because I want to focus on the coloring technique for this lesson. But if you want to watch the full process video, again, I'll leave it in the class notes. So let's get started adding color to our basket. Much like how we add color to the painting plan, we are gonna use a hard light layer. I'll add a new layer above our grayscale layer and set it to the hard light blending mode, not forgetting to set it as a clipping mask. Then, because our basket is gonna be kinda brown, I'll choose a brown color and paint it in. Don't worry about getting the right color the first time because you can always play around and trial and error. Now, to really highlight the lighted part, I'm gonna choose a lighter and yellower color to paint in the highlighted parts. Again, I bring the highlighted parts to a yellower tint because our sunlight is yellow. To match my style, instead of using an airbrush, I'm gonna use my hard render brush on a really low opacity to add in that brighter color. And when I'm happy with the overall color, I'll combine the two layers. And we can leave it like this, but I will go in and layer in some more colors to fit in with the style of the rest of my piece. I will add in the more saturated color for the halftone between the light and the shadow part. And for the shadow, I will add in my secondary color using blue. And I'll choose a really bright and saturated color for the halftone. That really brightens up this piece and exaggerates the lighting. And to finish up, I'll just erase the parts that are behind her hand. And that's her basket done. For the mission, finish rendering the clothes of your character and use the grayscale to color technique to render any props. If your current piece does not feature any props, please choose a random object and try it out on a separate canvas. And that concludes our rendering chapter. We rendered our character from sketch to finish, and in this lesson, we learned how to render clothes and various props using a new technique. In the next chapter, we will be touching on our character's environment. And in the first lesson, I will teach you some easy backgrounds to add to your character portraits if you are not in the mood to render a whole detailed background. See you there!